Here it is. The car that broke the rules and started it all. The GTO. It was the brainchild of car designer John DeLorean. At the time, his idea sounded about as crazy as dropping a V8 into a Honda Civic. But you know what? This baby could move, and that's all that mattered. In 1956, John DeLorean was a young auto engineer hired by General Motors. His challenge? Sell more Pontiacs and make them more exciting.
The problem they had was they built a very old folks car, and as a consequence, their audience was dying off. So the business was diminishing. There was zero excitement because those people didn't want excitement. And it was a pretty sad situation.
To get the image change off to a start, DeLorean and his team put together a newly styled high-performance Pontiac line in 1959.
I came up with a concept just sort of accidentally of widening the tread, so that led to the so-called wide track Pontiac, which gave it I think we widened the tread about 4 inches and brought the wheels out to the sides of the car, and all of a sudden the car took a new planted look. It looked like it belonged on the road, not like a guy with a hat on. It was too big for him. It was incredible how that little thing made such a giant difference.
The wide-track Pontiacs caught the attention of young car buyers. And while they were available with the large 389 and 421 cubic inch motors, they were not yet called muscle cars. Instead, they were marketed under the name Super Duty. To further increase their prestige, modified versions of these new Super Duties hit the racing circuit.
I think one year we won 49 out of 53 stock car races in the country. So it was a thing to generate excitement for the division and to bring it into a younger audience. And as a consequence, we did lose all the old people, but we did wind up with the young, more affluent customer, which is exactly where you want to be in the car business.
DeLorean knew performance would sell, and the next logical step was to put a big engine in a smaller, lighter car body. But there was one problem. Official GM policy called for small cars to have little engines, and big, expensive cars to have bigger engines. Something about safety and profits. But did that stop DeLorean? Today, GM cars start life as a computer-aided design that comes to life on screen. But in 1963, DeLorean just built the prototype.
I took a smaller car, a Tempest, and I had a big engine put in it, some aggressive tires. I bought a Hurst shifter out of a catalog somewhere, and we put all the parts together and put a more aggressive suspension on it. And that was a car that I used driving back and forth to work. It was fun. And I'd lend it to somebody for the weekend. I'd say, here, you ought to drive this. And I could never get it back. So I said, well, I think there's a market there. And indeed, it proved to be true. It was just a car that everybody fell in love with the minute they got into it.
DeLorean named his prototype the GTO, a tribute to Ferrari's V12-powered race car, the Gran Turismo Omologato. His next challenge was getting the first true muscle car past GM management and into production.
He decided he would break the rules, work these things through the committees at General Motors, put a big block engine into this mid-sized car, and suddenly the GTO was born.
DeLorean worked around GM's engine restrictions by offering the first GTOs not as specific models, but as high-end options on the mid-sized Pontiac Tempest.
It was not too big, not too small, two-door, relatively affordable. A big block 389 placed in the engine bay, and of course, a very contemporary-looking automobile.
The public response to the GTO was very, very strong almost immediately. The car was a hit. And it's funny, too, because the car wasn't necessarily a looker. It was an attractive car, but it wasn't wild, it wasn't crazy. It looked like a pretty mundane mid-60s car, but at the same time you had that big block performance.
Want to see what really helped the GTO flex its muscle? Check this out. The GTO got its power from a 389 V8 engine. On top of that was a Carter 4-barrel carburetor that helped the engine develop an impressive 325 horsepower. But true enthusiasts ordered the car with 3 double-barrel carburetors. an option known as the tri-power setup that boosted the engine output to a road-burning 360 horsepower. The factory advertised this baby could do 0 to 60 in 6.6 seconds, and the quarter mile in 14.8 seconds, at a comfortable 95 miles per hour. In other words, this was not your father's Pontiac, and there was nothing else like it in 1964. 70 million children from the post-war baby boom have become teenagers and young adults. This was the car that defined their new automotive culture. It had bucket seats and a rally gauge cluster that included details like the flag speedometer. Pontiac management hoped to sell about 5,000 of the special models in the first year of production. By the time the tire smoke had cleared in 1964, Pontiac had sold more than 32,000. DeLorean and his team were on a roll. To boost sales for the next year, Pontiac launched their Tiger promotional campaign.
Pontiac's GTO is all Tiger.
The advertisement called the GTO the car for the man who wouldn't mind racing a Tiger if someone would only put wheels on it. Maybe it was the Tiger, but I think the car sold itself. By 1966, this was the best-selling new Pontiac model of all time. More than a fad, the GTO was a reflection of its times that sparked a whole new culture.
I truly believe that particular car is a culture car. It represents the era. It was a very tumultuous era. You had the civil rights concerns. You had the women's rights movement. You had the dramatic anti-war activism responding to the Vietnam War. And these cars were built in that generation. And I think Detroit was able to identify that these individuals were different from their fathers or their grandfathers. And so they built these cars accordingly.
It's an obsession with speed and competition that started with the GTO, America's first muscle car. What followed was the muscle car revolution. Beastly machines that brought power to the people.